Hello. In today's video, we're going to be looking at writing task 1 for the academic exam for IELTS. Now, if you're like me, going through school, there was a lot of anxiety wrapped around writing. And that's because I believe that writing was something from the figment of my imagination that somehow made its way onto the paper. But as a writing teacher, what I've realized is writing is a procedure. You follow step by step by step to complete the task. And while I believe that sharing your ideas, going through the thinking process in writing is a very powerful way of learning, IELTS Writing Task 1 is asking for you to complete a specific task. And we're going to go over it together in this video. And I believe that if you understand these steps, it's not going to matter what the question is. You'll be able to complete this task in 20 minutes, and you'll be able to complete 10 of these tasks in 200 minutes if necessary. But don't worry, that's not necessary. Please check the timestamps here if you want to scrub through the video to find specific topics or information, and be sure to ask any questions in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you like content like this. One of the first questions you need to think about when writing anything, whether it's a thank you letter to your grandmother or a complaint letter to a company where you had a problem with a product, an essay for a teacher, or an exam essay for an examiner, you need to think about the audience. And what your audience is thinking about is this right here. This is the public descriptor, which you can find by doing a quick Google search. I'll put the link below. And there are 4 key criteria that the examiner is looking for in your essay. The first one is task achievement. In task achievement, they want to know is, did you understand the question and did you satisfy what the question was looking for? It's really important that you have a clear overview, and I'll talk a little later about what that means. And you clearly present and highlight the information. That's your task achievement, and that is worth 25% of your score for this section of the test. Next is coherence and cohesion. And coherence and cohesion is making sure that what you're saying makes sense. We're looking for clear progression, and we're looking for some key words that are letting us know. For example, you might want to say overall in your second paragraph to let the examiner know that, hey, ding, 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 this is my overview. And there's a few others which I'll discuss later in the video. Third is lexical resource, and this is a fancy name for vocabulary. Now, nowhere in the public descriptor does it say academic or advanced vocabulary, but the question is, are you using the correct vocabulary to satisfy the task and communicate your ideas clearly? And this will be best shared in an example, so we'll come back to this. And fourth is grammar range and accuracy. When we're looking at grammar range and accuracy, we're seeing, are you using a variety of structures? For example, when you look at a chart and it has a timeline, are you aware that some of the timeline is in the past, present, and future, and are using the correct verbs accordingly? Also, are you using adverb and adjective forms correctly? Like increase, increasingly, words like this. So you're using a variety of forms, not necessarily very advanced and academic, but you're using just a variety that satisfies the task. Remember, writing is a thing, and for writing task 1, the examiner is looking for certain things. For 1, did you complete the report in 20 minutes? 2, do you have 4 paragraphs? 3, is it at least 150 words? 4, do you have an introduction, overview, and 2 clear body paragraphs? So now what I'd like to do is go into what the introduction should have, because like I said, this writing is a thing, so we are looking for things. We should be able to write things. So here we need to divide writing task 1 into 2 groups. We have the line graphs, bar charts, tables, and pie charts on one side, and then we have maps and processes on the other side. So first we're going to take a look at the bar charts, line graphs, tables, and pie charts first. So for your introduction, we are looking for 4 to 5 things. Did you describe what type of diagram it is? Did you paraphrase the title? Did you mention what kind of information is in the x-axis and the y-axis? And did you mention the information in the legend? Now, some charts are not going to have legends. That's why you'll only need 4 things instead of 5. Next is your overview. And I would say this is the most difficult part because this requires you to be able to recognize patterns and identify the significant data in the diagram. But to do this, you only need to ask yourself 4 simple questions. Because we're not here to write about all of the information, only the significant information. And this is only a short report, so you don't need to write about all of the significant information, just 2 or 3 examples of it. So ask yourself, what is the biggest? And what is the smallest? What has been stable or what has fluctuated? If you're dealing with a diagram that has a time scale, then things increase or decrease over time. So you want to ask what increased the most over time or what decreased the most over time. Once you identify that, you'll write 2 or 3 simple sentences, and that's your overview. The overview is so important because it is guidance for your body. Your body paragraph 1 is going to give details and comparisons about that first major trend that you found. And your second body paragraph is going to give details and comparisons about that second major trend that you found. The wonderful thing is that everything that I want to say about writing task 1, I managed to do in just under 7 minutes. So it's not a lot of information, but it's really important to remember. There's some slightly different information. There's an important difference, in fact, with the maps and diagrams. And I'm going to cover that in another video. So please don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on that later. Okay. Now what I'd like to do in the second half of this video is go through a model. And for this, I'm using the, I guess the screen capture kind of like video thing, and you can follow along there. There, I'm going to be repeating a lot of the same information, but giving you an example. Because I believe that if you're going to be a good writer, you need to see models of good writing. And I believe that what I have for you satisfies the criteria. At least it gives you an idea. But please remember, I'm just a guy on the internet with one opinion and with a limited amount of experience. So please follow my example at your own discretion. This is what a typical bar chart will look like. You see in the box above, there is the chart below shows the results of a survey about people's coffee and tea buying and drinking habits in 5 Australian cities. It says summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an overview after an introduction and then 2 body paragraphs. In the introduction, I'm looking for these 5 things. Well, the type of diagram is a bar chart. The title is about the coffee and tea buying and drinking habits in 5 cities in Australia. The x-axis information mentions those 5 cities: Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, and Hobart. The y-axis information tells us the percentages. Now, this is important because this is where a lot of people make mistakes. Don't call them numbers. Mention what type of units we're dealing with. So are we dealing with people in millions? Are we talking about kilometers per hour? Are we talking about millimeters? Are we talking about percentages? So that's why the y-axis information, that's the important information from the y-axis. And lastly, the legend. These different colored bars or different shaded bars have different meanings, and I want to mention it. So we're talking about the buying fresh coffee in the past 4 weeks, buying instant coffee, or the people went to a cafe. So these are the choices. And your introduction should look like this. I've color-coded it for clarity. It says, the bar chart shows the coffee and tea buying habits of people from 5 different Australian cities. The cities include Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, and Hobart. The chart also shows the percentage of people's different ways of drinking coffee or tea. I didn't focus so much on my grammar and vocabulary in my thinking process. In my thinking process, I was thinking about what is the information from this picture that I can now convey in sentence form. Next, we want to look at the overview. And here we want to look at the biggest information and the smallest information. And what I see very clearly is, we'll call it the dark gray. The dark gray line shows that went to cafes for coffee or tea in the past 4 weeks was the highest. In Sydney, for sure. In Melbourne, it was the highest. In Brisbane, it was the highest. In Adelaide, it was slightly below. And Hobart was the highest. They do this on purpose because they want to see if you have the language to be able to handle this complexity. It's almost perfect. It's almost perfectly easy, but it's not. So what I want to write is something like, overall, the largest percentage of people in almost all of the Australian cities went to a cafe for coffee or tea in the past 4 weeks. So I showed the examiner that my language is flexible enough that I can use an expression like almost all, because that's true. Now, as far as what I mean by that, I will share that in details in the body paragraph later, but for now, that's enough. So that makes up what's the biggest percentage. Now for the smallest percentage, it's much easier. This is the black bar. And it says, now for the smallest percentage, it's much easier. This is the black bar. And it says, the smallest percentage of Australians bought fresh coffee in the last 4 weeks. And that's it. That's my overview. I focus on what was the biggest. I focus on what's the smallest. Next, my body paragraph, my first body paragraph, is only going to focus on that biggest trend. I'm not going to synthesize anything. I'm not going to compare the biggest and lowest. I'm just going to focus on what was the biggest. And the first thing I do is I handle that almost all cities. So in 4 out of the 5 cities, over 55% of the people went out to cafes for coffee. Only Adelaide was the city where less than 50% of the people went to cafes. Melbourne had the highest percentage, with approximately 64% of the people there buying coffee in cafes. What I make sure that I do is I include the actual percentages when talking about it. And I make a slight comparison when I talk about Melbourne was the highest, using the superlative form. I could have used higher or highest, those kind of forms. That's the kind of grammar that I need in order to compare. The second body paragraph is now going to focus on the smallest proportion. And this one is much more straightforward, but I'm still doing the same thing. I'm making sure I'm including the actual data. And I write, the smallest proportion of Australians bought fresh coffee over the 4-week period. In all 5 cities, less than 45% of people purchased fresh coffee. The percentage of Brisbane and Adelaide residents who bought fresh coffee was the lowest at under 35%. It's not very long, only 42 words. I make sure that I repeat what I said in the overview, and then I add the actual percentages. And then I make some sort of comparison saying that Adelaide, of all of these, Adelaide was the lowest. Adelaide and Brisbane were the lowest. I'm not gonna worry about which one of those two is lower. They're both kind of equally lower. All right, welcome to the end of the video. You made it. That was a long one, and there's a lot of information there, so good for you. I hope you found it interesting and helpful. Please be sure to check those timestamps so when you review, you know which sections you want to look at and practice more. If you have any questions, please feel free to mention in the comments anything you want to know or anything you want me to share in future videos. I will definitely be making more videos, not just bar charts, but line graphs, pie charts. Oh, Mr. Chicken, please stop it. Sorry about my neighbor there. So please remember to like and subscribe and hit the notification bells so you don't miss the future videos. Have a great day and see you in the next video.